Montana Territory, 1878. A late winter wind howled across the open plains, rattling the windows of Xavier Sullivan's modest ranch house. At 25, Xavier had built a respectable spread in Paradise Valley, though the locals still called him the young Sullivan. His father's legacy, 400 acres of prime cattle land, had become his burden and blessing 3 years prior when influenza had claimed both his parents within a week of each other. Xavier stood at his kitchen window, watching snowflakes dance in the cold morning light. His ranch hands were already seeing to the cattle, leaving him alone with his thoughts, a dangerous place these days. The isolation of ranch life had worn on him. He believed, with the conviction of a man who'd lost too much, that the frontier was no place for tender emotions. Love was a luxury afforded to townspeople, to those who didn't have to worry about drought killing their herd or bandits stealing their horses. A rancher stands alone, his father had told him countless times. The only reliable partner out here is the land itself, son, and even she'll betray you when the rains don't come. Xavier had taken those words to heart, especially after burying his parents. He'd thrown himself into his work, expanding the herd, building new fencing, improving the small main house. The Sullivan Ranch was prospering, but its young owner was withering inside, though he'd never admit as much to anyone. A knock at the door startled him. Xavier wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and crossed the rough wooden floor in long strides. When he opened the door, Jasper Miller, the town's mail carrier, stood stomping his boots. "Morning, Xavier. Got something interesting for you today." Jasper handed over a thick envelope. Came all the way from St. Louis. Xavier thanked him and closed the door, examining the unfamiliar handwriting. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, his eyes widening as he read. "Dear Mr. Sullivan, asterisk in response to your advertisement in the matrimonial news, I am pleased to inform you that we have arranged passage for Miss Sophia Jameson to Montana Territory. She departed St. Louis on March 3rd and should arrive in Bozeman by March 20th. Asterisk Xavier's hands began to tremble. Advertisement? Mail-order bride? He had done no such thing. Then realization dawned. His ranch foreman, old Tom Whitaker, had been hinting for months that the ranch needed a woman's touch. Xavier had dismissed the suggestions outright, but apparently Tom had taken matters into his own hands. Just as Xavier was about to crumple the letter in frustration, a smaller note fell from the envelope, a hastily written message in different handwriting. "Mr. Sullivan, asterisk I pray you are a good man. I have no choice but to come. Please understand when you see me, asterisk, S.J." The cryptic message sent a chill through Xavier that had nothing to do with the Montana winter. On March 20th, Xavier found himself pacing the Bozeman train platform, still unsure why he'd come. He'd confronted Tom about the deception, but the old cowboy had simply shrugged. "You need someone, boss. Ranch needs a lady. You gonna send her back after she's come all this way?" Xavier had no answer to that. His moral code wouldn't allow him to abandon a woman who'd traveled halfway across the country, even if under false pretenses. Still, he had no intention of marrying a stranger. He would explain the mistake, offer her accommodations in town until she decided her next move, perhaps even pay her return fare if she wished. The train whistle pierced the air, and Xavier straightened his new shirt collar. At least he could be presentable when he delivered the disappointing news. Passengers began to disembark. Xavier scanned the faces, looking for a woman traveling alone who might be his unexpected bride. As the platform cleared, only a young woman remained, clutching a small carpet bag. She wore a modest blue traveling dress, and her honey blonde hair was pinned neatly beneath a simple bonnet. She was looking around uncertainly, clearly waiting for someone. Xavier approached her, hat in hand. "Miss Jameson?" he asked. She turned, and Xavier nearly gasped. She was beautiful, with delicate features and striking green eyes, but the left side of her face bore the unmistakable marks of violence, a yellowing bruise along her cheekbone and a healing cut near her temple. She immediately lowered her eyes, turning the bruised side away from him. "Mr. Sullivan," she acknowledged softly. I understand if you wish to void our arrangement." Xavier felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't experienced in years. Whoever had done this to her deserved a reckoning. But more immediately, she needed reassurance, not rejection. "Miss Jameson, I should explain. There's been a misunderstanding about the advertisement, but he stopped when he saw fear flash across her face. But that doesn't matter now, he continued. You're here, and you're safe. He gestured toward the bruise she was trying to hide. You're not alone now, he said simply, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Relief flooded her features. Thank you, she whispered, the two words carrying the weight of a desperate journey. Xavier offered his arm and led her toward his wagon. As he helped her up to the seat, he noticed how she winced slightly, suggesting injuries beyond those visible on her face. It's about an hour to the ranch, he explained as they set off. Paradise Valley lives up to its name, especially this time of year with the mountains still snow-capped. I've never seen mountains before, Sophia admitted. She was 20 years old, she later told him, and had never traveled beyond St. Louis until now. Xavier found himself pointing out landmarks as they rode. The distant Gallatin Range, the pine forests that bordered the valley, the spring-fed creeks that would be running high with snowmelt. Sophia listened attentively, asking occasional questions in her soft voice. Were you born here? She asked. Pennsylvania, originally. My parents came west when I was 10. My father had a dream of raising cattle under Montana skies. Xavier surprised himself with how easily the conversation flowed. What about you? Have you always lived in St. Louis? Sophia tensed. Yes. My father was a clerk for a shipping company. He died 2 years ago. She offered nothing more, and Xavier didn't press. As they crested the final hill overlooking the Sullivan Ranch, Sophia gasped. The main house stood proudly in the center, with several outbuildings arranged nearby, all backed by the majestic mountains. Cattle dotted the verdant spring pastures, and smoke curled from the bunkhouse chimney. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's home, Xavier said simply. Mrs. Beckett, the housekeeper who came 3 times weekly to cook and clean, had prepared the guest bedroom on Xavier's instructions. When they arrived, she fussed over Sophia, plucking disapprovingly at her bruises, but asking no questions. Get some rest, Xavier told Sophia. We can talk more tomorrow about arrangements. That night, Xavier lay awake thinking about the frightened young woman sleeping across the hall. Her unspoken story was written in the bruises on her face and in the wariness of her eyes. Someone had hurt her badly enough that she'd fled halfway across the country to marry a stranger. The thought made his blood boil. More troubling was his own reaction. The protective instinct he'd felt on the train platform had only intensified throughout the day. It challenged everything he believed about keeping emotional distances on the frontier. A woman like Sophia brought complications, vulnerabilities. Yet something about her quiet dignity in the face of obvious suffering resonated deeply with him. Morning brought clarity, at least about immediate concerns. Xavier found Sophia already in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Beckett prepare breakfast. She'd changed into a simple green dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and he noticed she'd attempted to cover her bruises with powder. After breakfast, Xavier invited Sophia to sit on the porch, where the spring sunshine had warmed the wooden chairs. Miss Jameson, he began, I need to explain something. I didn't place that advertisement. My foreman did, without my knowledge or consent. Sophia's face fell. I see. Then I've imposed on your hospitality under false pretenses. I should leave as soon as possible. No, that's not what I'm saying, Xavier hurried to explain. You're welcome to stay. I just wanted to be honest about the situation. We can determine next steps without any pressure or false obligations. Mr. Sullivan, I should be honest as well. Sophia's hands twisted nervously in her lap. I responded to the advertisement because I needed to escape St. Louis immediately. After my father died, I was forced to live with my uncle. She touched her bruised cheek unconsciously. He has a violent temper, especially when drinking. When I threatened to report his behavior, he warned me that no one would believe a hysterical female over a respected businessman. Xavier's jaw tightened. Is he pursuing you? I don't believe so. He was simply glad to be rid of me. The bride agency paid him a small fee, which he was happy to accept. She looked down at her hands. I had nowhere else to go. Xavier studied her profile, the determined set of her chin despite the fear that still lingered in her eyes. He made a decision. Miss Jameson, I propose this. Stay here, not as my bride, but as my housekeeper if you wish. The position comes with room, board, and wages. You'll be safe here while you decide your future. Sophia's eyes widened. You would do that for a stranger? I would do that for anyone who needed help, Xavier replied. And you're not exactly a stranger anymore. For the first time since her arrival, Sophia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face despite the fading bruises. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Sullivan. And please, call me Sophia. Xavier, he offered in return. The following weeks established a new rhythm at the Sullivan Ranch. Sophia proved herself capable and hardworking, taking over household duties from Mrs. Beckett, who gratefully reduced her visits to once weekly. Xavier found himself looking forward to returning to the house each evening, where warm meals and conversation awaited. One evening in late April, Xavier arrived to find Sophia on the porch, a letter clutched in her hand, her face pale. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "It's from St. Louis," she said, her voice trembling. "My uncle's business has failed. He's coming west to claim what's his." "That's me, Xavier. Under the law, as my guardian, he has rights to my person and labor until I'm married or 21. Xavier's mind raced. "When is your birthday?" "Not until December." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "He says he'll be in Bozeman by month's end." Xavier paced the porch, thinking rapidly. "There are options. We could speak to Judge Wilson in town. Or," he hesitated, then looked directly at her. "Or we could marry in truth." Sophia stared at him, shock evident on her face. "You can't mean that. You never wanted a bride." "What I want has changed," Xavier said, surprising himself with the realization that it was true. In just a month, Sophia had transformed his home from an empty house to a place of warmth and life. Her quiet strength as she healed from both physical and emotional wounds had earned his deepest respect. And something more. "This isn't how I would have chosen to propose," he continued awkwardly. "But I care for you, Sophia. I believe we could build a good life together." Sophia studied his face. "I won't marry out of mere necessity," she said finally. "If we marry, it must be because we both believe in the possibility of love between us." Xavier took her hand. "I believe in that possibility very much." The kiss they shared was gentle, tentative, a promise of something that could grow. They were married by Judge Wilson the following Sunday, a simple ceremony attended by Xavier's ranch hands and a few neighbors. Sophia wore a cream-colored dress she had altered herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Xavier couldn't take his eyes off her. As they exchanged vows, Xavier felt a certainty he hadn't expected. This woman, who had arrived on his doorstep bruised and frightened, had awakened something in him he'd thought long buried. The capacity to care deeply for another person, to let someone matter more than his own safety. Their wedding night was approached with tenderness on both sides. Xavier was patient, understanding the trauma Sophia had endured. Their physical relationship would develop in its own time, built on the foundation of trust they'd established. The days that followed were filled with the practical matters of married life on a ranch, but also with discoveries about each other. Sophia's love of poetry, Xavier's secret talent for whittling, their shared enjoyment of chess in the evenings. Then, just as May bloomed across the valley, a rider appeared on the ranch road. "Someone's coming," Sophia said, spotting the dust cloud from the kitchen window. Xavier stepped onto the porch, hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. As the rider drew closer, Xavier could make out a well-dressed man in his 50s, riding a quality horse that looked nearly spent from hard travel. "That's him," Sophia whispered, appearing beside Xavier. "My uncle, Harold Jenkins." Xavier stepped slightly in front of his wife. "Stay behind me." Jenkins reined his horse to a stop and dismounted with the awkwardness of a man unaccustomed to riding. His clothing had once been fine, but now showed the wear of hard travel. His face was flushed with anger and exertion. "There you are, you ungrateful girl," he spat, ignoring Xavier completely. "Do you have any idea what trouble you've caused me? Get your things. We're returning to St. Louis immediately." Xavier placed himself squarely between Jenkins and the porch steps. "Mr. Jenkins, I presume. I'm Xavier Sullivan. Sophia is my wife now, and you're trespassing on my property." Jenkins's face contorted with rage. "Wife? Impossible. She can't marry without my consent." "Judge Wilson would disagree," Xavier replied evenly. "We have a legal marriage certificate. Sophia is no longer under your guardianship. You've stolen what's mine." Jenkins lunged forward, but Xavier was younger, stronger, and sober. Xavier caught the man's arm and twisted it behind his back in one smooth motion. "Mr. Jenkins," he said, his voice dangerous, "I know what you did to her. The only reason I haven't broken your arm is out of respect for my wife's wishes." "Xavier," Sophia called, her voice steady. "Let him go. He's not worth the trouble." Xavier released Jenkins, who stumbled forward, clutching his arm. "You have a choice," Xavier told him. "Leave now and never return, or I'll have the sheriff arrest you for trespassing and attempted assault." Jenkins glared at them both, hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over," he hissed. "It is," Sophia said, stepping forward to stand beside Xavier. "You have no power here, Uncle. I suggest you return to St. Louis before your creditors realize you've fled." Jenkins's face blanched. Apparently, Sophia had struck a nerve. "The stage to Bozeman leaves from town in an hour," Xavier added. "I suggest you don't miss it." Jenkins looked between them, calculating his odds. Finally, with a curse, he remounted his horse and rode away. That night, Sophia broke down in Xavier's arms, finally releasing the fear she'd carried for so long. "I wasn't sure I had the strength to face him," she confessed. "You've always had the strength," Xavier told her. "I just gave you a safe place to use it." Summer brought new rhythms to their life together. Sophia planted a vegetable garden beside the house and began teaching the neighboring children to read 3 afternoons a week. Xavier continued expanding the ranch operations, but now made sure to finish his days early enough to enjoy dinner with his wife. As their physical relationship deepened, so did their emotional connection. Xavier found himself sharing stories of his childhood that he'd never told anyone, while Sophia revealed her dreams of someday writing stories for publication. In late June, a letter arrived from St. Louis. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened it. "It's from my aunt," she said, scanning the pages. "Uncle Harold was arrested for unpaid debts the day after he returned. He'll likely spend several years in prison." She looked up at Xavier, her eyes bright. "We don't have to worry about him anymore." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Xavier confessed the fear that had been gnawing at him. "When your uncle arrived, I realized how easily I could lose you. If we hadn't married when we did." Sophia propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "But we did marry, and not just for convenience. At least, not for me." "Nor for me," Xavier admitted. "I think I began falling in love with you that first day at the train station." "When I was bruised and terrified?" Sophia asked with skeptical affection. "When you showed such incredible courage despite everything," Xavier corrected. "You traveled across the country alone, injured, scared, yet determined to build a new life. How could I not admire that?" Sophia kissed him softly. "I love you, Xavier Sullivan. Not because you saved me, but because you gave me the space to save myself." By autumn, the ranch was thriving, and so was their marriage. The harvest had been bountiful, the cattle fat, and the new foaling barn completed ahead of schedule. But the greatest joy came on a crisp October morning when Sophia confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks. She was expecting their first child. Xavier's reaction surpassed even Sophia's hopes. He lifted her gently, spinning her around the kitchen before setting her down with exaggerated care. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our child." In that moment, Xavier realized how completely his worldview had transformed. The frontier was no longer a place where a man stood alone against the elements, where emotional connections were liabilities. Instead, it was where he had found his greatest strength, in loving Sophia, in building a family, in creating a home filled with warmth and hope. The long Montana winter passed with Sophia's belly growing round and their preparations for the baby filling the evenings. Xavier crafted a cradle from pine harvested from their own land, while Sophia sewed tiny garments from soft flannel. When spring arrived again, it brought with it their daughter, Emma Grace Sullivan, born as the first wildflowers bloomed across Paradise Valley. Xavier held his tiny daughter with awe, marveling at her perfect fingers and the tuft of blonde hair, so like her mother's. "She's beautiful," he whispered, sitting beside Sophia on the bed. "Just like her mother." "She has your eyes," Sophia observed, touching the baby's cheek. As the three of them sat together in the golden light of sunset streaming through the bedroom window, Xavier thought about the note that had fallen from an envelope just over a year ago, and the bruised face of the woman who had changed his life. "You're not alone now," he had told her at the train station, never imagining how profoundly those words would transform his own solitary existence. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "I'm thinking that my father was wrong," Xavier replied. "A rancher doesn't stand alone. The most reliable partner out here isn't the land. It's the people we love." He kissed his wife's forehead, then his daughter's. "It's family." Sophia smiled up at him, the last traces of fear long gone from her eyes. "And love. Love is the most essential supply for frontier survival," Xavier said with certainty. "Far more necessary than ammunition or winter wheat." As night fell over Paradise Valley, the Sullivan Ranch stood as a testament to that truth. A place where two wounded souls had found not just shelter, but a home in each other, proving that even on the rugged frontier, the heart's capacity to heal and love again remained the greatest strength of all.